Day 175, Favor without comparison, winning your God-given race. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12, Amplified Classic. Not that we dare to class or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves, but when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they are without understanding and behave unwisely. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 2. Therefore then, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses who have borne testimony to the truth, let us strip off and throw aside every encumbrance, unnecessary weight, and that sin which so readily, deftly, and cleverly clings to us and untangles us. And let us run with patient endurance and steady and active persistence the appointed course of the race that is set before us, looking away from all that will distract to Jesus, who is the leader and the source of our faith, giving the first incentive for our belief and is also its finisher, bringing it to maturity and perfection. And lastly, Galatians chapter 6, verses 4 and 5. But let every person carefully scrutinize and examine and test his own conduct and his own work. He can then have the personal satisfaction and joy of doing something commendable in itself alone without resorting to boastful comparison with his neighbor. For every person will have to bear his own load of faults and shortcomings for which he alone is responsible. We must confront one of the greatest enemies of favor, and that is comparison. Comparison rarely announces itself as pride or jealousy. More often, it disguises itself as discouragement, insecurity, or impatience. Yet comparison undermines favor because it shifts our focus from calling to competition. Favor is not disturbed by ranking, it's released by assignment. Paul is direct in 2 Corinthians. Comparing ourselves to others is not only unwise, it reveals a lack of understanding. Comparison distorts perspective because it ignores calling. God never designed you to run someone else's race. When you measure yourself against others, you begin judging progress by the wrong standard. Favor flows most freely when your focus is clear. Hebrew reminds us that each believer has an appointed course, not a shared course, not a competitive course, an appointed course. Endurance is required not because the race is the same for everybody, but because distraction is so common. Comparison is a great distraction. It adds a weight to your life that God never assigned. It'll cause people to rush seasons and despise the process, or abandon obedience in pursuit of outcomes God never promised them. When you compare, you question timing. And when you question timing, you pressure obedience. And when that happens, favor is hindered. The book of Galatians brings great clarity. Each person is responsible for their own work. Satisfaction comes from faithfulness, not comparison. It comes from alignment, not applause. Favor does not require you to outperform anybody else. It requires you to stay faithful to your specific assignment. This is especially important in seasons of visibility. Social exposure has multiplied opportunities for comparison. You can see everyone else's progress instantly and assume your pace is wrong. But speed is not the measure of obedience. Faithfulness is. Jesus never compared himself to others. He was fully aware of his assignment. That clarity allowed him to celebrate others without insecurity and remain unmoved by criticism, because favor produces confidence without competition. When you stop comparing yourself to others, your peace will increase, your gratitude will grow, your endurance will strengthen, and you quit chasing validation and you start honoring godly obedience. This is why Hebrews instructs us to look away from distractions and fix our eyes solely on Jesus. Favor flows where your attention is fixed. The moment focus shifts outward, comparison can begin to erode your trust. Your race may be slower, a little quieter, a little less visible, but it is no less significant. God's approval is not louder for some than for others. He measures faithfulness, not fame. And he also doesn't measure likes or dislikes on social media. If you're tempted to compare, ask yourself this: am I measuring success by God's word or by someone else's highlight reel? Favor does not reward imitation, it rewards obedience. So run your race, carry your assignment, trust God's timing in your life. Favor will meet you where obedience remains intact. Make this confession with me today. I refuse to compare myself with others. I run my race that God has appointed for me. My focus is on Jesus and not on distractions. I find joy in faithfulness, not in competition. Favor rests on my life as I honor my assignment. I run my race with endurance, confidence, and peace. And I am anointed to win, empowered to prosper, and impossible to curse through Jesus Christ.